study done last month by the Pew Research Center showed Hispanics are more concerned about the threat of the virus to their health and financial situation due to the fact that around 66% don't have jobs with the ability to work from home and therefore earn a paycheck.
We're seeing that Immokalee is like dry wood in the middle of a fire. Once this sparks, not only will it affect Immokalee, it'll also affect all of Southwest Florida. Lupe Gonzalo is an organizer at the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, a group fighting human trafficking and gender-based violence in the agriculture industry. But their current mission is to educate farm workers on the coronavirus. What we're doing is sticking educational flyers around the community at laundromats, at stores, and at farm worker housing camps. Also using their community radio station to spread information. I've been told to limit my time outside to stay protected. Eutiquio Martinez is a farm worker in Immokalee, and the information he's getting could save his life and potentially those around him. It's why the coalition is translating information from English to several other languages and art for workers who cannot read. If the workers stop working, stop harvesting, basically the country would collapse. While many are practicing social distancing, Gonzalo says many farm workers here don't have that option. Some workers live up to 10 or 12 in one dwelling. Collier County has given the coalition supplies, including hand sanitizer, gloves, and masks. Gonzalo says the farms they are partnered with have already taken steps to protect their workers. This week, multiple Collier County agencies, local nonprofits, and Littman family farms placed hand-washing stations like this one throughout Immokalee to help fight the spread of COVID-19.
Bienvenidos and welcome to Conversamos. I'm your host, Francisco Escobar, and today we're going to discuss the status and concerns of COVID-19. Before we start, I would like to introduce our panel: Mary Jo Rendon, Dr. Gabriel Cortez, Gloria Arjun Cabrera, Michael Lemus, Inca Rich, and Christina Chavez. Thank you all for joining. As we're continuing to be advised to stay in quarantine, schools continue to go through remote learning, small businesses have shut down, there have been countless layoffs and a record rise in unemployment claims. Our essential workers will continue not receiving essential pay, and the doctors, nurses, and other hospital workers are constantly risking their lives and health every day. The effects of this virus are hurting the Latine population immensely. To my panelists, how do we get here and how should we be moving forward?
I agree. It's a challenge, and it's interesting how, our experience right now is unveiling so many realities that I think we're aware of, but other people are like saying, oh, this is a huge problem we have here, when, it's interesting to hear these conversations taking place at this time.
And it's funny because there's been like the Chicago Teachers Union, they made available a website with different resources for family students.
Yeah.
It had the housing associations. They also had a website of different resources. And when you look at them, there are so many options, which is great. And then, but I always think about how does that come across for families, and how do they navigate that sometimes? Sometimes it's overwhelming. Of course, no one did anything wrong, right? But just in terms. And I think we need to do both, right? Both, so it can be available, and then taking steps on particular ones, right, to kind of elaborate on that.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, Gabriel, because I'm finding that in my town, like in Cambridge and Boston and in my school town, Waltham, there's an abundance of information and really valuable information. However, when I'm working with the Latino families, wow, having them access that is really the challenge, and walking them to it and then unpacking it with them is where the work really lies, I find.
Yes, it's a lot going on, even with teachers. I see on Facebook how different schools are approaching this differently. So and one grandmother, she's in Georgia, and she says basically the teachers reach out to the parents and ask if their kids are doing the activities that were sent home to them. It's like yes or no. That's pretty much what they do.
Yeah.
Right, and these are primary level students. And then talking to my goddaughter, who's a sophomore right now in high school, she says, we all call each other up and we give each other the answers to the homework.
Definitely doing like behavioral health therapy is way different by phone. It's not the same connect. I don't feel this. I wish I hear, like, I work with kids and teens and adults. So like I'm a psychotherapist, and I work with like from 6 years old to like I work with a woman that's like in her 60s. And I also work with teens as a coordinator of a program that focuses with kids that are teenagers that are on adolescent probation and adults on a court mandate because of dealing with minor offenses that haven't been that are not deemed required to go to jail. And because New York State just passed a bunch of laws regarding criminal justice reform, it's kind of like shifting things around here. But I work with a lot of people, and for them to not see them in person, it's like, okay, I can't really, like, you hear my voice, we share a couple of laughs, but for me to actually establish a connection with them, I have to see you in person. It is not the same, and luckily I've been able to develop that trust, but it's not the same as regularly, like seeing you in person, being able to share that connection, and speaking from like the side of like the patient or a client. It's like I want to see my therapist. Like I want to be able to let them know they're actually. I want to see the response to my statement, my words. I want to see that you're listening to me, and that's something that's very difficult, especially since most of my patients and clients are Spanish speaking. So it's like for them, it's just like I don't really see the connection that we're having. And first, the fact that it's all this is just like, yeah, it's like great. Yeah. So it's a little bit of it's a rocky start.
Are you able to do so? Are some of them just strictly phone, or is it a mixture of video? Some are phone.
So some people are not really comfortable with video, and it's many of them are many patients, if not immigrants, then first generation, and video for them is like almost like a bit of a taboo. A lot of families are traditional. I want a phone call, but then a phone call is not comfortable for me because why you on the phone for too long? Or what are you talking about? Or why you keep butting into my conversation? Or my mom's in the next room, she could hear me, and I'm trying to talk about why I'm feeling depressed. So it's like a lot of tradition, the intermix of tradition and modern society, and adjusting and assimilating to like the situation regarding the virus and quarantine, but also I like trying to like stay sane in a sense. Yeah. So it's just like people just don't know what to really do. Luckily, a lot of families are open to whatever is available. But I've had struggle with several families that just like I don't want to talk I don't want to talk about my personal life on the phone, nor do I want to do a video because I don't want you seeing my home, or I don't want you seeing, like, it's not your business to see what's inside my house.
Oh, you're absolutely right, Cristino. I think that's my biggest challenge as well. I work a lot with the Latino immigrant families at my school. The majority in this particular city of Massachusetts are from Guatemala, and I'm also from Guatemala. So I feel a strong connection with my students and their families. And I do these monthly workshops to empower the families. But given this kind of new stage of communication, it's been extremely challenging, and you touched upon those challenges of how to reestablish a level of trust when you're actually entering these homes, where I'm also a mandated reporter, and I'm very conscious of that, to be respectful of these spaces and what I'm seeing there with the children, the kitchen, this and that, or an open bathroom. So there's a lot there that I need to be aware of and protect myself, but also be able to protect the families, right? And understand that I'm intruding, right, into their homes with adolescents and little children. And so it's a very delicate space. And it's one that I'm very aware of. How are we entering this, even as Latinos ourselves, conscious of all of this? But how are my colleagues entering this space when they go in there? And what do they see and what do they understand? That to me it can be problematic, you know?
What do they see, what do they understand, and how are they prepared, and what are they equipped with, right?
Correct.
We're in a new reality, and folks are just really creating on as they go.
Yes, exactly. So what do they see? Is this reinforcing something or is this exposing something? I mean, I don't know where that is. And so that to me is it stirs a lot of questions in me.
I think it's very important to just understand that this whole system, society that we live in, right? It's a very colonial, patriarchal, right, hierarchical, imperialist society that doesn't care and provide a safety for the general population, right? And so when we talk about that Latinos or African Americans are not doing well, right? It's not because of our culture or who we are. The system was born like that. Right? And I'll give you a real quick example. So I had a student from Poland who asked me, why is there a stress-free zone at the basement of the campus, and during finals week we have a stress-free zone, which is very common in universities. People give massages, just relaxed music. And I asked her, I go, you know what? I go, in Poland, do you guys have healthcare, universal healthcare? She said yes. I go, do you guys have a universal higher education? She said yes. Well, we don't have either, and that's why we have a stress-free zone. We need one because we generally live in a very stressed out society. Okay? So I want to put that out there that this is the culture we live in. And now, like Mary Jo was saying earlier, now it's being exposed that there's no safety net for us now that we're in this pandemic.
The inequities is really what I feel like is being exposed during this time. I mean, I've been thinking about so many different populations and also who is now being seen as essential workers. So our farm workers who have always been giving us the food that we need are now suddenly being seen as important people when they should be seen as important people every single day. And it's really interesting to see just the working conditions that people that still have to go out to work, whether that be in the fields or in other places. What does that look like? What does advocacy look like for them? What do their rights look like? And when people, the general population, starts to see these people as essential, like I see a lot of things being exposed that should have been exposed a long time ago. And so going back to those inequities, like I've worked in education for the last, 6 or 7 years, and the technology piece is actually what's really standing out to me, is that there are so many students across not just colleges, but K through 12 that don't have access to the technology that they need in order to succeed. And so that also makes me think about, well, if they're being, assessed in a, as it pertains to their work, but they don't have even the bare necessity or the bare, to actually be able to provide or actually be on these classes or these Zoom calls or all those things, it's concerning because I think that, what I would hate to see is people judging or labeling people, not prepared or lazy or something like that, when in fact they don't even have the resources to get onto these calls or to actually join in on the classes. And I saw this image, I don't know if you all have seen it floating around social media, but there's this image and it's calling out to people that when they're thinking of folks working from home or studying from home, it was this picture of what appeared to be maybe like a studio apartment with maybe 5 or 6 family members living in the apartment. Yes. And there is no technology. And so that's the piece where I think that not just educators, but we all need to be informed. And, I just been seeing the fun aspect of the quarantine, people are like, oh, I'm still having a good time and being able to do all these things. And then I also think about the reality of other people and that they have a very, very different lifestyle and they don't have a choice in that sometimes. So it's just been really interesting to see the inequities because it's very clear. And I think finally the general population is seeing some of the things that maybe we've already been aware of these things for a long time, but now it's very much in your face in the media. And I think more and more people are finding out about these things that are not necessarily new. It's just that now that we've had to do this massive transition, it's very, very obvious.
Pandemic in the community I'm working in is actually what you were mentioning before, what Michael was mentioning about how many of us are in our homes doing things that we haven't done. I'm getting phone calls from from these kids telling me that someone has been sick, they don't have insurance, or I can't live in my building because I just had a bullet go through my my window. So it's like kind of that kind of, in these kind of neighborhoods, it's another world, even though it's just down the street. I'm also a psychotherapist. I work in New York City's Western Queens, Sunnyside area. My specific patients are all, if not kids who are first generation, all are Spanish-speaking adults from all different countries across Latin America. So I got several that are in South, several that are in Central, and a few in the Caribbean, who are taking this situation very differently, especially when it comes to mental health, because, and I can talk about it like for days, is how this situation, COVID-19, is not just something that's about the medical issues that are happening in society, or the legal issues in society, or the social aspects of society regarding labor and unjust wages and injustice with individuals who are employed and all such. It's also a mental health issue. Believe it or not, this is what we consider a traumatic experience. And as a mental health professional, we're definitely going to see situations where PTSD is going to rise high in several years after the actual pandemic, like the quarantine aspect is done. The leftovers, the residues of this pandemic will continue on as aspects of mental health that are untreated, comorbid with other issues like alcohol, substance use. Suicide's going to increase. I've actually had several patients I've had several suicidal interventions that I had to conduct to avoid individuals from taking that step, because that's something that's very common, especially within the Hispanic or the Latinx community, because we don't address it. And so that's something that I'm definitely seeing more of now, and I'm having to mentally prepare myself, because that's something that's going to be what I'm going to be working with a lot in the near future.
You know, it's very stressful, and I want to piggyback on what was just said, but I want to also frame it in. You know, I live in a very Latino, it's a mixed neighborhood, but it's very Latino, very Dominican, and we have a lot of low, essential service workers here. And I am an entrepreneur, but my background was in nonprofits. And so we have done things like all the young women are all Latinas or Latinos who work at the supermarket. And at first they were not being given protective gear. Mm-hmm. So we took it upon ourselves to start talking to these owners. Wait, you're making money, crazy like right now, but you need to protect your workers. And it was taking, realizing that they are our community. They live in our community, and we have to speak out and say, you need to protect your workers, and they should be making hazard pay as well. So they did that, and that's great. And part of it also is realizing a lot of this community is Spanish speaking, and so they have a lot of apprehensions. We are fortunate that our senators organizing the community, but again, it's making sure that, I'm making sure that my friends know what's going on, that I know what's going on, so we can plug in. And, right here in New York City and Manhattan, it's very tense. What I want to add also in terms of mental health, and I am initiated, I'm a spiritualist, but I'm also a Yoruba priestess in Santeria. Also, we have to take care of our spiritual health. Exactly. The energy, I've been out, and the energy is crazy. And if you do any type of spiritual work, I've brought that in my house and I'm exhausted. So it's about realizing that we're spiritual beings also, and cleaning off that energy, because it is very chaotic out there. And we talk about our emotional health, our financial health, our physical health. We also have to talk about our spiritual health. How do we remain balanced in very unsettling times? So some of my friends, we set up, chats to check in with each other and to remind each other, have you cleaned yourself? Have you saged? Have you used holy water? Have you used agua florida, right? Because these are what we do to clean our energy. So when we go out there, we are balanced and able to make correct decisions. So that's my take on it right now.
I could just add to that, Gloria, I really appreciate you bringing that up, because that's something that I've been really focusing on through social media, especially, is connecting to people spiritually, because I think that, of course, there's all the things that we see on the media. We're definitely understanding the social justice aspects, the inequities that exist. But I think spiritually, I really appreciate what you just said, because I was talking to someone on a podcast episode a couple of months ago, and she's really into astrology. She's very spiritual. I'm very spiritual. And we were talking about the energy that was coming to 2020. And it's really interesting to hear that episode now, because what we discussed was, we both felt very strongly that there was going to be this massive awakening, collective consciousness shift that was going to really bring a lot of things to light. Neither of us thought it was going to be a pandemic, but it's really interesting to see it through that lens, because it's like our society is shifting. I think more and more people are connecting to themselves spiritually. And something that I've been trying to share, at least with the people that follow me and my peers, is we have an opportunity here too. So of course, I think we all want to go ahead and make sure that, our peers, our family, our friends are okay, but it's very important that we tap within to understand ourselves during this time. Because I think, connected to the mental health aspect to this conversation, I think spiritually, like, we absorb so much energy from other people and from the heavy energy that's going on. And so I am right there with you. Like, I'm consistently thinking about, how much am I carrying? Can I cleanse myself of this? Like, how am I connecting to my ancestors, the spirituality component to it? And it's been interesting, because some people that were very against spirituality and are afraid of it are now becoming very curious or aware of these conversations. And it's fascinating to see that shift. And I think that there is a really big shift happening right now.
Right. And thank you for sharing that, Michael, because you make a good point in terms of people who have resisted before. When we talk about spirituality, there's different forms, right? So I can say, what, I meditate. And then my girlfriend, she's Catholic, and she's, very well practiced Catholic. And that's only, I can meditate and pray. It's the same thing. You know what I'm saying? The thing is that let's create this space for us to take care of our spirits, right? Spiritually. But what I do, I prepare school principals, right? I'm a associate professor in educational leadership. So my students, all teachers who want to be school principals, right? And one of the things that I teach them is wellness, self-care, and collective care. So in the beginning of each class, we start off with some breathing and some stretches. Each class, I do that. And the reason I do that, because the first day of class, I ask them, how many of you are stressed out? They all raise their hands. How many of you work with people stressed out? Everybody around them stressed out. Well, how many of you do something on a routine basis to take care of yourself? And I'll probably get 3 out of 14, right? I'm like, come on, y'all. Like, we don't teach wellness in our schools, right? We don't, the teachers do not learn this as in their teacher education. We don't teach it to our students, and we definitely share it with our community members. Mm-hmm. So we can have these conversations, but what I learn, I have to do it with them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I'm going to give you a tool. Go ahead.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So I thought you were going to say something, but for me, I'm going to give you a tool, and this is one tool, right? I don't believe that this is the one. This is the one that's going to save everybody, but let's share some tools, right? So breathing is one, checking in is another, using our language and doing affirmations, right? So for me, what I've been doing lately, I've been getting resources and tips on how to calm down, right? Calm ourselves down. I put together a meme that I'm still putting together on how to breathe into our stomach and our lungs, because we actually don't share that with people. My parents are from Mexico. I grew up in a Mexican immigrant working class community in Chicago. And this conversation I'm saying, people are like, they'll tell me, I have no idea what you're talking about. I said, okay, right? So they're the ones that need it the most. And the thing is, for me, we have to slow it down a bit, and we actually have to provide the tools so they can pick it up and use them.
But I think especially when it comes to spirituality, my mother, we grew up Christian, but we also believed in the spiritual aspect of our lives, that duality that exists. Yes. So as an adult, I realized that we are energetic beings. We are, energy connects us and how we use our energy. And if we as leaders in our communities want to come through this as lights, we have to ground ourselves to help others. and provide that role model to others. And it is mental health, spiritual health, psychological, diet.
Right.
I will share my surprise here in the, people are giving away food around here. And we went to the local school, middle school, to pick up some food. And those meals were nothing but sugars.
Right.
It was sugar. And I don't have children, but I saw that. I was like, no wonder our children cannot learn. No wonder they are gaining weight. No wonder disabled. All this food is nothing but sugar.
Right.
So, and I talked to a couple of people and they're like, oh, but at least they're eating. I said, no, we are still paying taxes and we need to demand that our children are fed better.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I think what's interesting, Gabriel, is how you're working with future leaders in school buildings. And then I also agree with Gloria in a sense that, we're talking about a cultural piece. And it's very difficult to teach culture to someone who's not part of the culture. So when we talk about that spiritual wholeness of a Latino and the complexity of our community, it's so complex, it's hard for us even to grasp all the different intricacies of it. How will someone from the outside see it as well? So for me, in terms of that wellness, is also adding to the conversation that the students and families that I work with, are recently arrived adolescents that are already labeled as, students with a limited and interrupted formal education, who are the dropouts. Also, families and students who don't have their papers in order, they're undocumented, who are afraid. So language is also an issue. How do we access information? How do we really communicate with the people around us that are supplying food, at the parking lot, which is absolutely full of starch and sugar, but it's not part of our diet? And how can they say no to free food at the same time? So there's all these tensions and all these contradictions where we want to help, and the families, it's very hard for families to say no when they're given so much, yet at the same time they're not being heard. And so that ability of not being heard by the leaders that go through these wonderful trainings, for me, is still the issue, because you can be very well informed, but doesn't mean that you still know what you're doing with the population that you serve. And I call that absolute ignorance in today's world. For me, it's not acceptable anymore when 11 million Latinos are undocumented in this nation, and we do have a large population of first generation Latinx who are still not in leadership positions. It's, for me, there's a problem here, and it's called a Latinx problem that's been going on for over 20 years. So, for me, it is our leaders, and we need more people like everyone in this panel to be leading our schools, our health centers, in order to have a different dialogue and to solve issues a little bit faster than what it is having to educate and inform our leaders. And that spiritual piece, I think, is what is truly missing in many levels, And where is the spirituality conversation in all our fields? I know it's absent from the school system. We don't talk about it at all.
and that's why it's in essence, right? So when you say spiritual, the way people receive that will vary.
Yep.
That's right.
So when I say wellness, I know for me, wellness is I'm connecting with my mind, body, and soul. I know for me, but I understand for everyone else, they interpret that in a different way. So wellness is a little bit more focusing on the physical, right? But we know it's about the spirit too.
Yeah.
I guess like with spirituality, I think it's really important, especially as a social worker. We've had to learn about the aspects of like social, biological, social, biological, and also spiritual. Those are like the biopsychosocial, spiritual aspects of a person. Those are all aspects of an individual that are important when it comes to addressing situations and issues. I think what's also important, especially now, is how the virus and the pandemic and the quarantines across the country are influencing families, whether it's parents grandparents onto parents, parents onto their children, or other influences like one's religion and spirituality impacting the families themselves. I don't practice any form of religion. My parents do. They're more evangelical, and I'm more into aspects of recognizing and respecting, as a Salvadoran firstborn here, much of the history of the indigenous peoples of my country have been basically wiped away. Luckily, there's still survivors in my home country thriving to bring up languages, culture into the academics, into society. But as of now, many families, especially here in Long Island, which is predominantly Salvadoran, dealing with a lot of issues, such as gang violence. Like, if I had $1 for every time I heard MS-13, I probably would be able to pay off my student loans, and I got 25 more years to go. But it's interesting because in a lot of these homes, I know for me personally, like, because I'm not religious, and religion plays more like a weapon as opposed to a form of support. So there are many people that experience a lot of struggles with that, and I as a mental health perspective of it, especially being quarantined, I really don't. I physically don't have a place to escape from, and that is a reality for many children who don't feel like they're like we mentioned before, how spirituality is different for everybody. What spirituality may be for one a child may not be the same for the parents, especially when a lot of parents are Latinx parents are immigrant parents. So what they were accustomed to back in the country of origin is not going to be the same understanding of what a child is learning from school. I mean, I wish schools did teach more about indigenous cultures, not just like a day or two as a lesson in social studies or history class, but more deep into the conversation in terms of what it means. But because children are being exposed to it or being introduced to it in the academic setting, that conflict begins to hit home. And because right now we're in a quarantine, it becomes like a clash of my parents think this is true. I know this is. I feel that this is. My school says this is true, or a person that is very in an academic sense is saying this is true. What do I believe is true? And that right there, for a lot of individuals, is stressful as itself.
It's very stressful. I agree with you, Cristino. That's our complexity. We're always straddling. Yeah. We're straddling not only navigating different cultures and languages, but also our spirituality. And that's what's coming down to, who are we? Who are we as Latinos or Latinx, right? And what does it mean to me? Because our journeys are so unique, and yet there's a very common thread where clearly we come from, there's a home pedagogy, which is very, very strong. We also are being educated in a school system of our host cities. So how do we bridge this? How do we make sense of this? And yet at the same time, we are incredibly there's perseverance, and we are at this moment at the front line of bringing the food to our table, taking care of the ill, and it's who's there right now without masks, without gloves, without any health insurance, without any social security, but they're still paying taxes. So that's also another complexity to these identities of the people that who are part of us and who we work for. And so I think in terms of COVID-19, again, yes, it's been exposed. But what will be the impact of this is going to be interesting, right? What's the impact in terms of the government, in terms of our structures and systems that we all come from? But more importantly, also, as you say, the people that we work with. For me, it's the young people. What does this say about them, right? And so I totally agree with you. I think it's been my conflict, my internal conflict, always juggling my identities as a Guatemalan, an American, but then married to a Spaniard, and dealing with different languages. And language is a part of my life. and it does impact my being, as it does my food and my energy. So I can only imagine what does this mean for someone who just arrived from Guatemala, from the highlands, who speaks a dialect, and speaks a dialect more than Spanish, let alone English. And those two other languages are being ignored because the system doesn't even honor that. That's huge. It's like chopping off an arm and a leg, and you still have to be able to walk and talk and think. So it's a real conflict. I understand what you're saying, and I really appreciate you saying that, because I think that is adding to stress, and it will have ripple effects moving forward as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned that these workers, when you were talking about the workers, how they're scrambling, right? And so we're always scrambling to figure out what can I do. But again, going back to these tools, right? So we drink. Think about the relationships at home. If you have, if it's a lot of people in your home, you can't participate, right? The domestic, the the kids and all that. So what tools do we to bring down, right? What is that we can do? And we know that the ones that need it the most are attention, right? So to me, that's what I'm working on. How can I come across these individuals and say, this is what you need to do to calm down,
Yes,
take your time before you move forward.
Gabriela, I wanted to say, I mean, I really appreciate that you're doing this with future educators, because, I went to grad school for higher education, and I thought I was going to become this big administrator in higher ed. And it was interesting because I was in that pathway, and I had a really big spiritual awakening a couple years ago where I realized that wasn't actually what I wanted to do anymore, even though I was doing quote unquote successful work and, had my accomplishments. And then it's interesting because as you all were talking, 2 years ago, I gave this big speech at a student affairs conference, and it was a big regional conference. And it was essentially calling out the things that happen in higher education to professionals around, toxic work environments, and how that can spiritually eat us up, and how through our spiritual awakenings, we get to go ahead and reclaim our power, our happiness, our stories, our narratives, and connect back to our ancestors. And it was interesting because that presentation was like a TED Talk type of a format. So I was in a room with vice presidents of student affairs, with faculty, with staff, with grad students. And it was an incredible experience because, one, it was a raw experience. I got to share what I've been wanting to share for a long time, but didn't really ever felt empowered to do so. And then finally, it was just like, you know what? No, because this needs to be called out. The field needs to discuss these things. And I had this vice president come to me the day after I gave the speech. And he said, I wish that people talked about this 20 years ago when I was going through it, because things could look different. And that's been very powerful, because I'm in education in a different way now, but the work that I get to do, and I ended up starting a business, and so now I get to coach clients, and many of them are actually education professionals, so they're higher ed people. And it's been interesting to talk to them about spirituality, because they see me doing my candle work and my crystals and my cleansing and all those things, and they're like, what is this? And you came from that world of being super accomplished in higher ed and getting all these awards, and now you don't really like talk about all those awards, but now you're talking about crystals and grounding energy and all this stuff. And for me, I'm like, yeah, because we're multifaceted human beings. We can be all of that. We can be higher education professionals, and we can also do our limpias and our baths and all those things. Why do they need to be separate? And I think that's the thing, is like, how, when we get into these positions of power, how do we show people that we can be these multifaceted human beings? And Gloria, I appreciate you energetic beings. That's what we are. We're energy. And people sometimes are, I get the curious people, but I also get the people that are like, what the heck are you talking about? But I've gotten to the point where I'm just like, look, I'm living my life, and this is who I am, and I've been wanting to be for such a long time, but felt ashamed to do it. And it's interesting because now, I have people that will message me out of the blue that were in the field with me like 5 years ago, and they're like, hey, I want to know why you're talking about the full moon so much. It's like, well, let's talk. But it is interesting to, especially now when people are having more time to connect with themselves, what that looks like when they have a little bit more time to just peek into what spirituality looks like for them. And just to end off this point, when I talk about spirituality, I always say that the beauty of it is that it's self-defined. And so whether that means that you pray every night or that you do your limpias or you are, investing your energy with crystals, it's going to look different for everyone. And I think it's about respect. And if we were able to go ahead and recognize that everyone practices differently, how do we embrace that, your practice may look a little bit different than mine, but it doesn't make it any better or worse than what I practice. And so it's been very interesting to have those conversations with people that in the past would not have been having them. So it's very powerful.
And there's still people who are against it. I mean, I'm aware of a healing collective that does all of that, and I do some of it myself. People that call them brujos, right? And they're like, don't talk to those people. So let's not forget that faction also exists, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I grew up in California. And yeah, we were Seventh-day Adventists, but she would go to the curandera around the corner for a reading. But what I did want to share is when I moved here to New York, I was like the lone Chicana around here. And coming to New York also helped me get into therapy to deal with the idea of being raised under white supremacy, And for me, I'm in Santeria, West Europe, a religion, and I was in Gestalt therapy. So Gestalt therapy married with my Santeria process, they really supported each other. So, one doesn't cancel out each other, and they could really support each other. The mental health and the spiritual is a beautiful combination.
That's very important, actually. I was going to just say how many of us, especially within the Latinx community, how therapy is like the taboo of the culture. And you're going to a therapy. I'm not sick. Like for me, like short story, like I didn't see a therapist until I ended up finding myself going to hospitals to get myself checked out. And my parents never really seeked therapy until my dad started drinking alcohol and dealing with getting into trouble. So it's hard for us as people, especially within the Latino community, to accept the fact that we need more guidance on our mental health, and it's okay to get treatment. Like treatment isn't a taboo. It's something that it's like a necessity. It's as needed as medical services. Like we have, this coronavirus has been exposing a lot of things, especially when it comes to mental health. A lot of granted, you have a lot of businesses closed, but that's that you have alcohol, like liquor stores or that are still open, right? Business. These are like basically tickets for overdosing, or I need to have a drink because this only make deal with my stress. And the good thing is, I would say I'm proud to say that I am a Salvadoran therapist and a male therapist, which is very helpful for a lot of young men in the community who don't feel comfortable talking to
Absolutely.
A lot of older and white therapists, whether psychiatrists, social workers, mental health counselors, crisis counselors, whoever. The mental health aspect of this virus exposes the white supremacy that actually exists in mental health. For me to say that I work with fellow Latinos and Latinas in mental health field is but a blessing, because it's not that many within the community. And for men, especially mental health. I've been told by my own parents, like, why did you become a social worker? Why didn't you become a doctor? And that is like when, as broad and simple as COVID-19 problems, like that simple subject breaks and shatters so many stigmas and so many stereotypes that descend into whether it's medical, legal, spiritual, mental health professions, underestimating and underrating the concept of essential worker. How we look at nurses and doctors as essential workers. Yes, they are, but are you also recognizing the garbage man picking up the trash in the mornings, or the members of the community who work in supermarkets, like the ones that get actually packing your food? We're beginning to become more understanding and open to where all these problems are kind of sipping into, as well as exposing the realities of what society has established, especially here in the United States. a lot of children are now realizing that they need help. And luckily, I'm hoping states are starting to develop their ways of accessing mental health treatment or mental health services. In New York, I know our governor decided to put an emotional support line. But for me, this brings up the question of how we as a community are empowering our own members to be active in understanding mental health, or even if you desire to be parts of the mental health profession, being able to guide them in that direction.
And I think that's a great,
empowering them to understand.
I agree. I think that's an excellent question, and it's something that I've been kind of thinking about now, even listening, from Michael, Gloria, all of you. And something that comes out of these conversations is just what we're doing right now is storytelling, yes, telling our own stories and how powerful this is to build connections, to also validate ourselves, but also those who are listening to us who may share a similar story as well. So I find also as part of that healing process, it's one thing that we need to go through healing together. And there's no better way than to listen and to speak and to validate. Yeah, and I think that's what I really value about this conversation right now is how we're sharing our experiences. But for me right now, it's also a very healing process, given that it's been extremely stressful actually these last couple of 5 weeks. So this is very valuable to me, and I can see the power of this in a small group of just meeting you. Imagine what this would be like with the group that we do know, right? And we do have a connection with. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
I want to take it back to the Maya calendar. We're in the sixth sun right now, right? Remember when everybody was talking about the 2012, that was going to be the end of the world? There was a shift of consciousness where we're a consciousness of one, right? So according to different readings that I came across, it's the first time in the world where we're all really aware of each other, right? And you see, have the indigenous identities, cultures, rituals, and they're resurfacing, right? And we're to the point where Latin America and in places like Mexico, they're actually teaching the language now. So you see that. So what the according to was because we're gonna be a consciousness of one, some people will embrace it, individuals like us, but then you have people who are against it. And that's what they said. So they weren't prophets. They said this is what's gonna happen. There'll be people who are immersed. I mean, look at myself, right? I'm I'm Mexican, I practice yoga. I'm a Buddhist, you know what I'm saying? So it's just like all these different, we're all worldwide, right? And then, but what I was gonna say is, that being said, with the consciousness that exists, right? And I want to go back to my point about language. So in terms of affirming ourselves, in the last 10 years as an educator, there has now been a language to talk about social emotional situations, our feelings, what's going on. So when I say a check-in, let's check in. How you feeling? And what do you need? If we can teach these tools when we see each other, we have to talk to our youth in that way, to our family members, and also the language of checking your temperatures. How safe do you feel from 1 to 10, and how connected you feel, right? So if families can do this and just connect this with their son, like they're 10 being I'm totally isolated, I'm not connected. 1 being that I'm connected with everybody around me, and then how safe do you feel? I feel overwhelmed, I feel like terrified, that's 10, and I feel great is 1, right? So when we check in, what's your temperature, then we know where people are at. But those are rules that are easy to think of, but to
those are great ideas.
Yeah, so my whole thing, I'm doing an awareness campaign. I'm putting them down step by step and just flooding the social media and flooding intersections in the city.
Do you have flyers of those, Gabriel?
We're working on them now. I have a artist, youth from Little Village, Chicago. He's working on them.
Oh, wow. Well, share it with us. I'd love to get a copy.
For sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I would just share what I do on my social media. I follow health tips like that, and I post to my audience things to help them get through this time. So if you share that, I would love to share that with whoever follows me.
For sure.
Yeah, it's cool listening to all you guys. Like, I'm just here listening to you guys, and you know. I never really done stuff like this, so I'm shy, so like that's why I've been quiet. But I've been listening to all of you guys, and little story about me, like I'm a high school dropout, so like hearing you guys talk, like you guys are like doctors, and like so I feel like, all right, cool, I'm just gonna listen to you guys, you know. But yeah, I think it's all about decolonizing everything, you know, our medicines, you know, because I got a mom, she's 70, you know, I'm 29, so there's a big age difference. So like I see her popping like all these medications, but you know, it's all about decolonizing that medicines. You know, there's plants we could heal with, pray with, you know, like, and it goes back, like going back to our ancestors, you know, it's decolonizing everything they've really taught us, you know. And it's like, even like hearing the word Latino, you know, like in Hispanic, like I feel like that's like honoring white supremacy, because like that's like saying you're honoring Europe. And it's like, yeah, we probably do have Europe DNA, but was it really like from love or rape, you know? Decolonizing everything, our foods, the foods that we eat, you know? So it's like spirituality plays a big role in it. And it's like, yeah, we need to show that to our community. Just hearing you guys talk about all of this is like, yeah, like the 2012 thing that you just said, brother. I don't know if you know right now, but in Ethiopia, like that, the year right now, it's 2012, you know? So it's like, if you Google that, like, it's pretty crazy.
That's dope. Inca Rich, man, thank you for sharing, bro.
Yeah.
And you mentioned about the colonizing, right? So I work for a university, and I already know off the bat that these structures are not here to liberate us.
No.
I'm counting on these organizations, because that's not the purpose of their mission, right? That's not they're not taking care of us. But how can we, going back to what I call ancestral wisdoms? I think Angela Valenzuela coined that phrase, that there are so many practices that we learn from our abuelas, abuelitas, you know, brujas, you know, brujos, ancient times that have been, passed down down the line, and they are like a good friend of mine, Victor Arroyo. He's a healer in Chicago. He several family members who got the COVID-19. Some of them were in their 50s and 60s, and he shared what they were eating. He shared that they would heat up like jalapenos, cebollas, and put it on their chest. They would heat up limes and massage their feet. They would do the vapors. They would do like it's 12 steps. I could send them all to you because
Yeah, that'd be great.
You know what I'm saying? And he said that they're doing fine even though they had the virus. So keeping up, and he's like, you know, we have the tools. We have, right? Here in Chicago, there's two spaces that they do, and they're both connected to the Lakota Nation up north. And some of my friends, they actually gone out there and they learn how to build it. I forget what it's called.
The Nipis.
What's it called?
Nipis.
Nipis, thank you, bro. Thank you. And so you go away and they heat up the stones, but their whole thing is you're going to Mother Earth, right? And that's the whole concept. And we're rebirthing ourselves. So through the sweat, we're sweating out all our pain, spiritually, mentally, and physically. And they do it, and they learned that from the Lakota Indian. And but the thing is, there's a connection, because in Mexico there's similar rituals as well, because as we all know, the Americans were connected, right, before colonialism. So
with they call it the temazcal in Mexico.
Yeah.
I'd want to add that about the eating, decolonizing our diet. It's really important. And I had back surgery, and I was on medication. And last year, I decided to go keto. And it sounds really crazy, but I gave up sugar and I gave up carbohydrates. And I'm going to tell you how my health came back.
Mm.
So now when I see young people, when I talk to my people, I talk to them, really pay attention to what you're eating. Take the sugars out. Take the starches out. You know, improve your health. You know, build up, right? I tell people, build up your resistance, build up your immunity right now. Don't go for the sugars.
And on that note, I want to thank you all for joining us. Give yourself a round of applause. That's a great point to end on. For those watching at home, make sure you follow us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and our other social media outlets. Until next time, Conversamos.
Yeah, yo, it's is it that wrong? I'm making a song, I'm taking it back for the platform that I formed. You should help me transform. I run the reservoir, the predator, like a hungry carnivore. When I'm breaking through these heavy doors, this is Desert Storm. A metaphor to show I'm equipped and informed. I'm striking with the mega force, I'm lukewarm, your crew swarms. With the fear my lyrics do harm. If you ain't lending a hand, I'm breaking your two arms, so listen. I'm sniffing the difference on my mission, I'm craving. I envision these premonitions like Raven, I'm gifted. I saved it, now it's time to shift to my haven. My advanced pacing remains in a basin where I'm chasing pavements.